Welcome to Taking Up Space, the podcast with conversations exploring what it means to inhabit our bodies fully, without shame or apology, and reconnect with our innate wisdom to find healing and body liberation. I'm your host, Cassie, a licensed clinical social worker and certified sex therapist. For over 10 years, I've worked with folks to reclaim their bodies, their inner knowing, and their lives in a world that often seeks to diminish their voices and experiences. Through personal stories, expert interviews, and candid discussions with guests, we'll unpack the societal norms and expectations that interrupt our embodiment, like trauma, oppression, illness and pain, and the social constructs of gender, race, sexuality, beauty, health, and weight. My hope is that through this podcast, we'll learn to drop into our bodies and occupy space, physically, emotionally, relationally, and intellectually, with confidence and authenticity. So join me as we challenge societal norms, explore what it means to find wholeness, and reclaim our right to take up space as an act of resistance and body liberation. While this podcast might feel therapeutic, it is not psychotherapy and doesn't constitute a therapist-client relationship. This is a good time to mention, too, that this podcast will at times use adult language, so listener discretion is advised. Welcome to today's episode, which is super special. I am over the moon because we have an absolute icon joining us today on the pod. Get ready to be inspired by the incredible work of Lindley Ashline. Lindley Ashline creates photographs that celebrate the unique beauty of bodies that fall outside conventional beauty standards. She fights weight stigma by giving plus-size people a safe place to explore how their bodies look on camera, and by increasing the representation of big bodies in photography, advertising, fine art, and the world at large. Lindley is also the creator of Body Liberation Stock, which are body-positive stock images for commercial use, and the Body Love Shop, a curated resource for body-friendly products and artwork. You can find Lindley's work and get her free weekly body liberation guide, which we'll link in the show notes. But seriously, folks, Lindley's work is so incredible, and her generosity within the body liberation community is such a gift. I could not be more excited to share this conversation with all of you. So please grab your favorite beverage, get cozy. Let's dive into a conversation that's sure to leave you feeling more confident and allowing yourself to be seen. Without further ado, let's welcome the incredible Lindley Ashline to the podcast. It's going to be a ride you don't want to miss. Hey, Lindley, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
Oh, I'm so glad you're here. Well, I'd love if you could first start off with just telling us a little bit more about the work that you do and also how you're changing the world with doing that work.
Yeah. So I know you already recorded like the formal bio, so I'll just jump right in. I'm Lindley. I use she, her pronouns. I live outside Seattle, Washington, here in the US. What I do is multifaceted. I was talking to Cassie before we started recording about how I like to do a lot of different things so that I can have something a little bit different to do every single day. So everything that I do is based in body liberation, but I do primarily photography, portraits and boudoir, a little bit of maternity and family photography, and also stock photos through Body Liberation Stock. I do writing, a little bit of coaching, consulting, particularly for professionals who are involved in health at every size. Therapists, dietitians, nutritionists, doctors, coaches, sometimes other photographers. And I run a little web shop called the Body Love Shop. And I do so many things, I'm having trouble even remembering them all. A really fun and important thing that I've been doing in the last few years too is starting to build community spaces.
Yeah.
Particularly the body liberation blanket for it. And I know we're going to get to talk about that. But yeah, so sort of everything is based on this fat liberation and body liberation foundation. And then it's this sort of the different expressions of that.
I just love seeing your evolvement over time as I followed you for many years now, and just how you've expanded into some really unique and valuable services and opportunities for people to engage in. And truly, you have built such a cool community around you. And that's how I got tethered. I mean, I've never had my photo taken by you, but I've just been fascinated with all of what you're cultivating there. So I'm excited to talk more with you about community as well. I would love to hear a bit more around like what's what a part of your life or what in your story kind of led you to this path of fat liberation, body liberation work? I mean, was that before photography? Did photography come first? What's the timeline here for you?
So photography came first because I've been involved in photography in some way since I was a really little kid. Um,
Mm,
my very first photo was I was 3 or 4 years old, and this was in the early 1980s. So of course it was all film cameras then.
right.
And I had borrowed my parents' film camera, and I was trying to take a photo of giraffes or something at the zoo. And
Uh-huh.
of course, film is expensive. I grew up in a blue collar family, and so I think I only was able to take 1 or 2 shots. But at any rate, my first photo was of the railing at the zoo because I didn't understand that the camera was photographing where you were holding it and not where you were looking. Where you were, it could only photograph what you aimed it at. And
Uh-huh.
apparently I aimed it at the railing. So
Yes.
somewhere in my photos, I have this very close up photo of just a gray paint on from the
Oh,
railing at
I'm
the zoo.
yes, amazing.
So that was where it all started.
Yes. Railing
It
at the
was
zoo.
not a glamorous start. But yeah, so I had been involved in sort of nature photography for a really long time,
Mm.
purely on a hobbyist level and almost entirely self-taught. And so taking photographs of beautiful things in nature has always been this joy and this passion.
Mhm.
And then completely separately to start with, in the early 2000s, about 2007, 2008, I was on LiveJournal, if anybody remembers that
Oh,
website.
live journal, yes.
Yeah, pre-social media as we know it today.
Yeah.
I discovered this community on LiveJournal. They're kind of like Facebook groups, but the sort of the
Mhm.
precursor of a Facebook group called Fashionista, like fashionista, but with the word fat in it.
Yeah.
And it just absolutely blew my mind because
Mm.
here were all these really fashionable and trendy, mostly cis women, these fat ladies who just were living their best lives and like
Oh.
where they were wearing horizontal stripes and
Mm.
they were wearing bright colors and tight clothing and all these
Yeah.
things that we are all taught culturally
Mhm.
that are unflattering. And I think we might come back to sort of flattering later.
Yeah, that word flattering, yeah.
But
Mhm.
yeah, these things that aren't flattering or they make you look bigger than you are.
Mhm.
And they just were rejecting these rules. And I was fascinated.
Mm.
Just
Mhm.
like if you know the meme of like Michael Jackson eating popcorn, I was kind of sitting in the shadows, just like eating popcorn
Yes.
metaphorically
Uh-huh.
and like
Uh-huh.
just fascinated by these women.
Yeah.
And eventually I started experimenting with that too.
Mm.
And it turns out that as I got to know myself better, I'm not someone who is particularly trendy or fashionable or even interested in
Mhm.
clothing beyond is it comfortable, honestly.
Mhm.
But the fact that I could, like, I felt like it gave me permission to experiment. I felt like it gave
Mm.
me permission
Yeah.
to
Mm.
discover what I liked to wear as opposed to what I thought would be least offensive to the people around me.
Mm. Mhm.
And there, people were linking over to fat positive blogs. Started reading there, started discovering the science of why diets don't work, and started discovering the systems that surround us and that make us feel certain ways about our bodies.
Yeah.
And once I discovered that, there was no stopping me because I got so
Mm.
mad. I got so
Yes.
mad at being manipulated my whole life into
Mhm.
believing things about my body that A, weren't true, B, I
Mhm.
couldn't necessarily do anything about, and C, were making other people a lot of money and power,
Yeah.
because I felt bad about myself.
Mm.
And so these threads all started coming together in 2015, 2016. I had one of a series of crappy corporate jobs, and I was just discovering that I couldn't, from a mental health standpoint, I just couldn't do it
Mm.
anymore.
Mhm.
And I had the privilege because my husband supports us with his
Mhm.
corporate job.
Mhm.
He makes a lot more money than I did, even when I was in the corporate world.
Mhm.
And I said, I can't do this anymore. Are you okay if I take a leap and try my own business?
Mm.
And he has been super supportive. And I knew right away that I wanted to take my photography further and that I wanted to serve fat people, plain and simple.
Mhm. Mm.
both from a business standpoint, because we are a desperately underserved population, but also from a like, I get what it's like to live in a very fat body. I get how those bodies exist in the world and move and how it feels to live in that body
Yeah.
and how it feels to see that body.
Mm.
And so right away, like I knew that was what I wanted to do. So I
Mm.
spent about 6 months training, and this is the point where I did get some formal training,
Oh,
mainly watching video courses online. And I started learning how to do portrait photography, how to do boudoir photography, how to pose people, how to work with people. Because
mm.
people working with a person is very different from working with a flower or a mountain.
Yeah.
And it's
Yes.
it's very much a different experience for everybody involved.
Mm.
And so that is where these threads started coming together. And the more that I started thinking about people's bodies from a photography standpoint, the
Mm.
more that I got louder and louder about systems and power and body image and all of these things that I talk about today, because I can't separate from just me personally. I can't separate why we feel this way about our bodies from here's a photo of your body and you're going to feel a certain way about it.
Yes.
They're
Yes.
just intimately connected.
Mm. Yeah. I just love hearing your coming of age as a photographer and into this work. It's just so beautiful. And I see like just there's the fat activist in you that is like that takes shape in through photography. I mean, I'm actually curious from you, I mean, how you are seeing your photography right now as a tool for social change with fat activism.
It's fascinating because from a historical standpoint, from a big picture standpoint, the world around us is changing so fast. And activism, every kind of activism, fat activism included, is also changing so fast. And there are so many streams of it, which is wonderful because we need all the levels. We need the shallow end
Mhm.
of the pool and the deep end and the
Mhm.
slope in between. We need everybody. We need everybody's voices, no matter what kind of body that you're in. But images, not just mine, but images, period, it just play such a role in both culture in general, and especially all these image driven types of media, but also they play such a role in activism. And so I just have I have 15 different things I want to say and they're all fighting to get out of
Mhm.
my mouth.
Mhm.
But from the time that I really started being aware both of sort of myself as a business and a people photographer to
Mhm.
today, the number of fat positive and body positive, these are not exactly the same thing, or even like the women, sort of women's empowerment photographers, which are a different, again, a
Mhm.
different category. But all of these categories have exploded. And
Mhm.
one of the things that I have on my website is a guide to finding a body positive photographer in your own area.
Mhm.
Because people do travel in to work with me, but of course
Mhm.
that's not accessible to everybody.
Right.
And so the point is that all of these categories have exploded.
Mhm.
And even the number of stock photography websites that have
Mm.
some offering. It may
Huh.
not be great and it may not be actually inclusive, but that
Yeah.
have some kind of offering for larger images of larger bodies has also exploded.
Mm.
Getty now has some, Shutterstock has
Mm.
some, Unsplash has some. Again, they may not be great, but they exist.
Mhm.
Which, when we talk about images and the way they affect the media and the way the media affects our body image, sometimes it's better than nothing, sometimes it's not. It depends on how
Mm.
the image itself is done.
Yeah. Yeah.
But all of these things have exploded. And overall, with the things that are worse than nothing put aside, the images that are stigmatizing, putting those
Mhm.
aside, mm, it is pushing our activism forward and it's helping mainstream that activism. And all of this is a good thing. And I am one
Yeah.
small drop in,
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
aren't very many people like me who are photographing the largest bodies.
Mhm.
Although there, again, that category is exploding.
Mm.
Absolutely a good thing. Please
Mhm.
bring on the competition. We all need to
Yeah.
have that available
Mm.
to
I
us.
love that abundance. Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. Yes, I want there to be abundance. I want
Mhm.
everyone to be able to access images of themselves that are non-stigmatizing and that
Yeah.
honor their bodies. And it is so encouraging to see all these categories changing and activism changing.
Yeah. Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think as I just reflect on my own experience in having my photo taken, and even for listeners to think
Mhm.
about having your photo taken, so many of us carry so much anxiety about that.
Mhm.
And it doesn't matter. It just seems like it's a universal experience for most people of like having some kind of anxious process, or will this look okay, or what should I wear, and this is how I present to my world. And I think historically it's just been such a way that people have body checked, like comparison to like old photos of themselves, or looking back at moments that they've experienced and seeing their body. And it's just such a fraught place for people to really be with their bodies and celebrate and honor their bodies. And I'm curious, for you, how do you help folks as they're working with you navigate that anxiety of being seen, or like really developing this different way of engaging with the images of their body?
So many people come from all different places along that spectrum, from I can't look at myself in a mirror to
Mhm.
here I am, world, bring it on. I am delighting you with my presence.
Yeah, that too. Uh-huh.
And mostly I scare off the folks who are at the very beginning of that, because
Mm.
they need someone
Mhm.
whose voice is more gentle than mine.
Mm.
And again, we all deserve to have access points where we are ready
Yeah.
to access them. So mostly I get people who are a little further along in their own journeys.
Mm.
That said, it is, I won't say it's universal,
Mm.
but it is almost universal that we have problems looking at ourselves
Yeah.
to some extent. Because when I had my professional portraits done, I need to get them done again this year, because I think the last time I did was in about 2017. I got them back, and I had been doing this work personally for a
Mm.
really long time at that point.
Mm.
And all I could see was my grandmother's arms and her bingo wings.
Mm.
and and now I look at that and go, I see my family heritage in my
Uh,
body. That's cool. Genetics is cool. Bodies are cool. But that was something I had to come to terms with.
yeah.
And I had to exposure therapy myself
Mhm.
about my own arms,
Mm.
because there are some images that they're on my website of me where I have my arms thrown up and my arms are bare. And
Mhm.
you can see my underarms that
Mhm.
have some loose skin there. And I don't know whether bingo wings is a common term or not now that I've said
I've
it.
never heard that actually.
So I got that, but that was the term that I heard,
Mhm.
that I
In
had
your
absorbed
family,
with
that was
family.
used, huh? Hmm.
Yeah. Although now I don't even know where I first heard it, but
Mm.
maybe it's a Southern thing. But the point is that we all, almost all of us, have challenges looking at photos of ourselves,
Yeah.
because we have studies that show that children of 2 and 3 and 4 years old have opinions about bodies that they weren't born with.
Yes.
Since before we could even talk, we have
Mm.
been absorbing messages about bodies.
Yeah.
And our brains are really good at retaining those things and applying them to
Mhm.
ourselves, because that is what we're trained to do. So
Mhm.
it is totally normal. It's
Mhm.
completely normal
Mm.
for you to have feelings about images of yourself.
Mhm.
And it can be really challenging,
Yeah.
especially when that intertwines with oppression,
Yeah.
and when it intertwines with family stuff, when it intertwines with
Mhm.
trauma.
Mm.
This is
Mhm.
so complex.
Mhm.
And we're not used to seeing ourselves,
Mhm.
unless we are in some kind of role where we are photographed or filmed
Yeah.
regularly. We don't see
Mhm.
ourselves very often. And
Mhm.
we don't see ourselves frozen in time. As we
Mm.
record this, we're on Zoom,
Yeah.
and I'm seeing myself talking. If you were to stand in front of me with a camera right now and snap a picture from the same perspective, the same distance away, it would look different.
Mm.
In part because of the lens that's in my webcam is
Mm.
not is not the same as a lens would be in a camera,
Yeah.
and it would be frozen. And so we are used to seeing, if we are seeing ourselves, usually it's in motion or we're seeing other people.
Uh-huh.
A snapshot in time is not the same thing.
Mm.
And to come back around to helping people with that. Again, people come in at all different places. They're
Yeah.
ready for different things. And so it ends up being this individual sort of
Mm,
customized thing for each person.
mhm,
And sometimes I need to refer out in the
mm.
sense that I can take your pictures, but I'm not your therapist. um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and also, neither one of us are magic in the sense
Mhm.
that I cannot promise you that you're going to come out of this loving your body.
Yeah.
That is not a realistic goal
Yeah.
or a realistic
Mm,
promise. And so sometimes I need to send someone to a body image coach or to their own therapist
mhm.
or to their eating disorder treatment team before they are ready to see themselves.
Yeah.
Although the flip side of that is quite often people come in to get photos as a tool for learning to see themselves.
Yeah. I was going to
And
say,
so
I think
they're,
it's a facilitator for the
yeah.
work, right?
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so, yeah, people's eating disorder treatment teams will send them to me, or
Mhm.
their therapist will send them to me locally, which is an honor. I mean, how cool is that?
That's incredible. Yeah.
but, but yeah, people will come to me to get photos so that they can do exposure therapy with their mental health pro.
Yeah.
And so I have lots of tools
Mm,
that I use to work with people to help them see themselves and to help them work with photos of themselves without having a panic attack.
mm.
But it's part of a journey. It's not the journey.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm. I think something that has been so compelling for me in your work and how it's evolved for you over time is just this sense of how larger bodied people are normally captured in images in our culture that's dehumanized, or maybe it's just like there's no heads, it's just like
Mhm.
bodies moving through space, or the images are stigmatized or fetishized or something like that. And I think how you are using photography to help people reclaim what it means to be in their
Mhm.
body is so powerful. I'm wondering, in your process in working with the folks that you do, I mean, how do you collaborate with them to ensure that they feel empowered and that it's okay for them to take up space and it's really an honoring of their body versus maybe something else?
Well, when we talk about reclaiming, there are kind of two types of reclaiming that tend to go on
Hmm.
with the clients who come in. There is the reclaiming where someone is kind of staking a claim to the body they live in.
Hmm.
Like I've heard
Like,
it,
this
I've
is
heard
me.
people call it sort of coming out as fat or coming
Yeah.
out as disabled in the
Yeah.
sense that like yes, everyone around me can see that I'm fat. There is no angle I can stand at. There's no, if I stand up really straight, I'm still gonna have a big stomach.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no universe in which someone is not gonna be able to tell that I'm fat. But people staking a claim to that
Yeah.
is a little bit different because it's like, yes, I'm fat. I acknowledge this
Mhm,
to myself.
mhm.
And
Mm.
I am ready to sort of, even though I can't stop presenting that to the world,
Mhm.
I'm ready to be okay with that. It's sort of staking
Yeah.
this claim to your own body.
Ye
And the other reclaiming is kind of this exploring a changing body. It's this process
Mm.
of reclaiming and reclaiming a body as it changes. And
Mm.
that might be changing because it's eating disorder recovery. It might be aging. It might be gaining weight or losing weight. It's often a process of gender exploration, which is also
Mm.
a freaking honor that someone would feel
That's
safe.
amazing.
I've had folks who have come in right before or right after top surgery. I've had folks who are not out of the closet who were coming to me because they are a closeted trans person, and this is the only place they felt safe to
Mm.
explore how they look when they
Mm.
feel authentic.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna cry.
I have goosebumps and chills. It's such sacred work.
It is sacred work, all of it, all of
Mm.
it. Someone who has said, this body is changing and I'm ready to see it again and again as it goes. And of
Mm.
course, all our bodies are changing all the time, but
Mhm.
some of these changes are more drastic than others.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
so it's this literal claiming, well, I guess it's still metaphorical, not literal, but it's this claiming, but then it's also teaching people to the giving people a space where they can stake claims, where they can set boundaries, where they can openly express
Ah,
their needs and preferences and desires
Mm.
without worrying about whether they're secretly being too much or secretly taking
Mhm.
somebody off or overstepping bounds. Just the one of the first things I do is we sit down and we talk about whatever body feelings are coming up. But I also have this talk I give everybody about using their words because I'm good at reading people,
Mhm.
but again, I'm not magic.
Yeah,
And
you can't read
so
minds. Yeah.
yeah, and so
Mhm.
and I also work with lots of people with special mobility needs, or well, they're not special, they're normal. They're normal. Something like
Mhm.
what? 10 or 20% of the United States has a disability. Like this is
Mhm.
normal.
Mhm.
But we think of it as being a special need.
Yeah, right.
Um, a need that is not respected in the mainstream. Um,
Mhm.
maybe it's a mobility need, maybe it's a sensory need. When I work with autistic folks, I tell them that you don't have to look directly at the camera.
Mm.
I'm also autistic. I get this. If you watch any of the video recording of this, you will see that generally I'm not looking right in the webcam. Although how many people do that? That's weird.
Yeah,
Anyhow,
yeah.
we talk
Mhm.
about taking the time you need, taking the space. If you don't want me to point the
Mhm.
camera at you for 5 minutes,
Mm.
cool. If you need me to walk away, that's fine. If you need
Mhm.
to eat, drink, pee, go take a brief phone call. If you need somebody with you for support, if you need, I worked a few years ago with a woman who came in and she was acting kind of squirrely. Like
Mhm.
something wasn't right. And when we sat down and we had the boundary talk, it turned out that in her particular body at that particular time, she wasn't able to stand without pain for more than about
Mm.
60 seconds.
Mm.
And once she said it, once
Mm.
she released that into the room, I was able to structure the entire photo
Mm.
session so that she didn't have to.
Mm.
And so I arranged everything around her so that she always had something nearby to grab, or there was a chair right behind her, or something. And then whenever she was getting ready to go down, she would say 5 seconds. And
Mm.
5 seconds later, she'd sit down, and it was
Mm.
fine. There is no reason for us not to honor these things.
Yeah,
But it is so rare for people to feel like they have the space to
yeah,
do it. And
yeah.
so that
Mm.
taking up space is just as
Mm.
important
Mm.
as me not photoshopping bodies, which I also don't do.
Mm.
But these sort of metaphorical taking up space and claiming that space, things are just as important as me not minimizing their actual body.
I love the spaciousness that
Mhm.
allows that to happen, right? For people to really lean in and feel out what does feel honoring for me or what would feel right. And it just gives a sense of empowerment and agency that I think is so uncommon in some photography spaces, right? Like versus someone directing you and telling you and trying to make something happen. Mm.
Yeah, and it's an evolving process for sure. Every single client that I have, every single stock photo model that I work with, I'm learning more about, because
Mm.
again, these are, yeah, like you just said, these are not mainstream photography principles.
Mhm.
And so I'm certainly not the first or only person to be holding this kind of space for
Yeah.
people, but it's still an evolving thing. I
Yeah.
learn with every single session more about how to hold that space,
Mm.
both for that specific individual, because of course I work with people, some people multiple times, but
Mhm.
also if someone is using a wheelchair that day, I'm learning more about how I can best give
Yeah.
them a great experience and also get great photos and also give them lots of space.
Mm.
Or if someone is like the woman who wasn't standing for more than a minute, or whatever. I'm always
Mhm.
learning and always adjusting future sessions from those
Mhm.
things that I learn.
Mhm. Yeah. Mm. It's flexible, it's client directed. That's
Mhm.
so beautiful. So, can we talk for a minute about like the concept of being flattering, like flattering photos, flattering clothing? Like, tell me how you hear that and work with that in your in all the different things that you do.
Well, everything that I do, because systems approaches resonate with my brain, I tend to come at everything from a systems approach. I'm always looking at the big patterns and the bigger picture, and we feel bad about our bodies because of racism, which is a bit of a different
Mhm.
topic. If that is new to you as you're listening to this, look up the book Fearing the Black Body.
Mhm.
It is vital reading if you are interested in body liberation at all. And also there are many shorter interviews and talks with Sabrina Strings, the author. And so I don't think we have time to get deeply into that today,
Yeah,
but
I'll link it in the show notes. Yeah.
oh, perfect.
Great
Yeah.
book.
Yeah. And it's really important. It's
Yeah.
also academic. It took me a couple tries to get through it just because I'm not used to reading academic works. But yeah, very important. But that the systems, always thinking about systems. Yes, we're coming back to flattering, I promise.
Yeah.
Always
I'm with
thinking
you.
about- always thinking about the systems. And so it was a big shift for me personally when I started thinking about beauty as compliance. And this is something that I talk quite a bit about elsewhere too. But when we say beauty, we are talking about a specific aesthetic that is valuable in a specific place and time. If you look on YouTube, there are some really interesting videos that are like time lapses where it's what beautiful looked like in the 1880s and 1890s and 1900s and so on up through today. And Kim Kardashian will be in there somewhere. But and then 1890s, it'll be like the Gibson girl. And the Gibson girl and Kim Kardashian had very different bodies and have in the case of Kim Kardashian. But the point is that beauty is part of our systems of power and it's part of our cultural standards. And all these things are part of things that are bigger than us. So if I meet a specific beauty standard, I'm going to pick out my hair right quick. I have nice white lady hair. It's kind of wavy. I don't do anything to it other than brush it, wash it, and air dry it. That's it. And I am able to do that and have it look acceptable because our culture values my kind of hair and considers it attractive.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with the moral value or the worth of my specific hair on my head. It's just that it grows in a way that happens to need little to no maintenance or treatments to match, to be compliant. And so when we talk about beauty, in my head, it's always coming back to compliance with beauty standards. And so when we say flattering, there's a little bit of nuance here, but essentially what we mean is thin.
Yep.
Flattering equals as close to thinness as a beauty standard as possible.
Yeah.
And again, the specific type of thinness varies over time. You know, in the 1880s, flattering would have meant as close to the Gibson girl out silhouette as possible. Today, it would be as close to the current token it girl of 2024. It's probably not the Kardashians anymore, but I don't know who it is.
Yeah, I don't know either, but insert person here.
Yeah, Bella Hadid.
Sure, we'll
Let's
go with that. Yeah.
Doesn't matter. I'm old. I'm in my 40s. I don't know who's cool anymore.
I'm really untethered. Yeah.
As everyone who's older than 43 is like, oh, come on.
That's okay.
But yeah, so the point is that when we talk about flattering, what we mean is thin. And Cassie, I don't know if you allow cussing on your podcast, but
yes, please.
Okay. Fuck flattering.
Yes.
Fuck flattering. When we talk about flattering, all we mean is compliant with beauty standards, primarily thinness. And it can be really hard to break out of that. And also, it can be really hard to survive in a culture that values these specific things without trying to comply with them. And so on one hand, on a personal level, fuck flattering. On the other, I occasionally do corporate consulting for big corporations as a holdover from my corporate life. And when I do, am I going in with my belly completely unbound by clothing, in the sense that, like, am I going to wear hard pants or am I going to wear soft pants when I go in? I'm wearing hard pants because I need to be compliant.
Yeah.
If I am going to a nonprofit gala, even though I don't normally wear makeup, I'm probably going to wear makeup because I will be treated better if I am compliant.
Yeah, that's real.
And so there is always a balance, especially the more marginalized you are. There's always a balance between compliance and survival. And on one hand, fuck flattering. On the other, if you need to invest in flattering to survive, I'm not going to judge that.
Yeah.
You got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, I love that you create space around honoring what people do to survive and cope in this culture that's very body oppressive and like rewards and gives power to some that align with whether it's flattery or something else, right?
Yeah.
But I also love and I'm really energized by the concept of flattering because it's like disobedience, it's
Mhm.
resistance, it's just a tool of political divestment that is so radical in some ways, right? In this
Yeah.
culture. So fuck flattery and also giving space for honoring just how challenging it is to live in this body oppressive world and all the things that we do to survive and cope and manage with all those complexities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the, I don't want to say my favorite, but because that's terrible, but not one of the examples that I really want to bring up often is fat folks who need to get weight loss surgery to access other
Mm,
surgeries that we need,
yeah.
particularly gender affirming
Yes.
surgeries.
Hmm.
And on one hand, weight loss surgery has a ton of risks, and it's not, the long-term effects are not well understood. And what we know is pretty scary.
Yeah.
On the other, am I going to judge someone who's getting weight loss surgery because they have been lied to about the effects, because they have been told,
Hmm.
I know someone who had weight loss surgery because they were told by their doctor that they would not live to see their children grow up. And this was without
Oh
evidence,
my God.
just because they were fat.
God.
And they were terrified, and they went
Of
to have
course.
surgery.
Yeah.
Or because you need to access another surgery and you've been told that's the only way you
Mhm.
can access it,
Yeah.
is if your BMI is below a certain amount. Am I going to judge that? No, of course not. I'm mad at the system. And
Yes.
I do shout a lot, but I'm shouting at systems, not individuals,
Mhm. Mhm.
unless you're directly working to increase fat people's oppression, then yeah, I'm probably yelling at
Yeah,
you.
probably. Gonna
Sorry,
localize that to
Arthur.
you. Yeah. Well, I want to make sure we create some space for all of what you're doing to create community, body liberation community, fat liberation community, and you have a couple new projects that you've been working on. So can you share a little bit more? Do you want to start with the blanket fort? I always want to call it pillow fort, but it's a blanket fort.
Yeah, yeah. So there are two things that are, there's one that's new, and then the blanket fort is not as new, but I'm trying to talk about it more and more because it has grown beyond my dreams.
Mhm.
So the Body Liberation Blanket Fort is a community that I run on a platform called Discord. If you've ever used Slack for work, it's a lot like Slack. It's just
Mhm.
different look and feel, but it's the same kind of concept.
Mhm.
So it's a real-time chat platform, and there's generally always someone around 24/7 wanting who is around to chat. We have people right now in the US and Europe. I was going to say all over the world, but I don't want to I don't want to overspeak. But right now in the US and Europe, anyone around the world is very welcome. Oh, we have some Aussies too.
Mm.
And it is, I created it as part of my Patreon, thinking, oh,
Mm.
it would be nice to give people a real-time place to connect that feels more private than like a Facebook group and is
Yeah.
also less prone to being infiltrated by trolls, where I'm vetting everyone. I know that the people are coming in who are nice people who get
Mhm.
it and who are really interested in hanging out, of all sizes, although we do center fat folks. And I had assumed that what people would end up wanting was a place where they could do, like, answer the journaling topics that I post publicly. Like, it
Mm.
would be a private place where they could do that and only have other people who are safe to be around and see that. And that it would be, we would be having lots of very vulnerable, tough discussions. And you know what people actually want? They want a place to hang out where no one is moaning about the calories in a donut. And that is
Yeah.
wonderful.
Mm.
Like, people have made it so awesomely clear over time that they just want to be able to hang out
Mhm.
and be their full selves
Mhm.
and not have to deal with diet culture, and just not, and just have casual conversations and talk about their hobbies and just be in somebody's living room, and that somebody is not going to let there be diet discussions, plain and
Mhm.
simple. And it has been so cool to watch that develop.
Mhm.
And we have people who are chronically ill. We have people who, lots of people who are diabetic, lots of folks who use CPAP machines, including me. Lots of people who are neurodivergent, lots of autistic and ADHD folks. We have several folks with dissociative identity disorder.
Mhm.
And it is so cool and
Mhm.
such an honor to be the person who gets to hold that space open
Mhm.
for people, to be trusted to hold that space open
Yeah.
where people can say,
Mhm.
hey, I'm going to use there is a plugin, a bot that we use, like for the folks with DID, so that they can have a different, so that their internal folks who are speaking can have their own profiles.
Oh, wow.
And the fact that people
Incredible.
feel safe enough to come in and do that, like,
Mhm.
what a freaking honor. Like, I can't even express. And people who are super fat and InfiniFat, who we have lots of channels that are accessible to everyone in the
Mm,
fort. And then we have affinity channels.
mm,
One that's just for fat folks, one that's just for
mhm,
super fat folks, one for our queer folks, and then some others where you just all you have to do is specifically opt into them.
mm,
Like, nobody's going to gatekeep you out of it. But it is a space where, for example, we very fat folks, we have special skin needs, like skincare needs.
mhm,
And we can go in and talk about that, or talk about bathroom stuff, or
mm.
talk about accessibility, and not have an audience of people who aren't
Yeah.
who don't
Yeah.
share our life experiences.
Mm,
And so just having these safer spaces
mm,
has just become so important to the people who are in there. And it's,
mhm,
yeah, like I said, it's such an honor to be able to have part of my job be to
mm,
get on Discord every day and say, this is our space.
mhm.
This is our community.
Such an incredible resource. I mean, having a safer place where people don't have to edit or apologize, they just get to bring themselves and just feel seen and humanized, I think, in ways that maybe aren't so common in a general
Yeah.
forum. Mm.
Well, and it's so cool to be the one running the space too, because I get to say, okay, it's not a free space. I do require some kind of monthly payment from people,
Mhm.
partly because this is part of my job.
Yeah,
And I
mhm,
spend
maintaining
about,
that, I'm sure, is a big
yeah,
investment of your time.
yeah, I spend a
Mhm.
couple hours every day just being present in the blanket fort. So yeah, it's a pretty good part of my job. And it is labor to maintain a
Yeah,
community. But
yes.
also because people are more involved, and
Mhm.
they're nicer when they have a financial stake.
Oh,
But there are 3 levels, and the bottom one is $1 a month, because
yeah.
I have a few people in there who a dollar a month is a hardship. And
Mhm.
so I just put them in there. So even
Yeah.
that dollar
Mhm.
is kind of optional. And then the highest right now is $10 a month, and that helps subsidize the folks who are at the lower levels,
Mhm.
the folks who do have more privilege and are able to contribute
Mhm.
more.
Mhm.
And having that, now that monthly payment too gives you access to everything in my Patreon. So there's a big library of resources I have in
Mm.
there, and there are other rewards beyond that. But the blanket
Mhm.
fort has become the primary thing
Mhm.
that people sign up
Connection
for.
ground. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Um,
that's great.
yeah,
Well,
it's
and
just so
I
cool.
really get I think I've seen this in different folks too, of like having a little bit of a paywall keeps the trolls out. Like trolls
Mhm.
aren't going to pay to
Yeah.
troll. So it makes it that much more likely that it can be a safer space.
And it's funny too, because you wouldn't think that paying a single dollar would be enough to keep out like the Kiwi Farms trolls, but it does. I don't know why. They're not willing to pay
They only want
a
to
dollar
troll
to
for
get,
free.
yeah,
Right.
which is great.
Yeah. That's incredible. I mean, how have you noticed how is community so important in doing body liberation work? Like what's the value of that?
It's both having people around who have your same life experience, and having that the place where you can talk about, for example, it is often a hotly debated topic in the fat community when a fat celebrity loses weight for lots of different reasons.
Yeah.
And so it's really important for people to have community with similar life experiences when
Mm,
something happens related to that life experience that you want to talk about.
mm,
When Adele did
mhm,
whatever. I don't tend to follow celebrity news, but Adele lost a bunch of weight. It was a
mhm.
big news topic.
Yeah.
Um, and a lot of people had complicated feelings about that.
Mm,
And Fat Community was
mhm.
where they went to go discuss it.
Yeah.
And of course, lots of these topics are very complicated, and it doesn't mean that everyone is going to agree when they discuss it.
Yeah.
Big feelings, but at the same time, relatively safe place to put those feelings. But then also just every marginalized group finds value in having people of that group to hang out with.
Mhm.
And it doesn't mean that it excludes people outside that group. Like I said, there are lots of thin folks in the fort when they stay out of the specific affinity spaces, and then we all have fun in the general spaces.
Mm,
But having those places, when you can go somewhere and not be constantly
mm,
reminded of how the world hates you,
mm,
it lets you breathe.
mm,
It lets you let down your guard in a way that is really, really important.
mm. Yeah, without the same editing or apologizing that, yeah,
Or even just being constantly braced for the next comment.
yeah, yeah. So I'm also interested in hearing more about your other project, Scene. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it scene comes back to what we were talking about earlier with support for photography clients around body image and seeing images of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And and so scene really grew out of that evolution of my sessions with clients,
Mm-hmm.
because when I started photographing people, I was doing what almost every other photographer does. I bring people in, I photograph them, I give them a gallery, or I walk them through choosing their prints, whatever, and then they go home and
Mm-hmm.
never see them again. I may or may not ever hear back from them about the long-term
Mm-hmm.
ramifications of their
Yeah.
session.
Hmm.
And it really quickly became clear that A, that is not a great experience for marginalized people, especially, or really for
Mm-hmm.
anybody. And B, it's not enough. And
Mm-hmm.
so as I have gone through the years working with people who have real body concerns and real body image stuff and all those things we talked about earlier, I started adding on more and more support around the sessions. And so now we meet beforehand and we talk about body stuff. We meet after and we talk about body stuff. And so Scene is both a way for the people who are coming to me as photography clients to get more support than I can reasonably offer purely as part of their session experience.
Mm-hmm.
But also, so anybody around the world can access that support.
Mm-hmm.
And so some people want to enroll in Scene because they're working with a photographer wherever they live. They have a wedding coming up. They're getting engagement photos done. They're graduating from something. I have had a Scene participant before whose family was getting end of life photos, like
Mm-hmm.
these very vulnerable, mournful group photos done with a family member with a terminal illness.
Mm-hmm.
And this person wanted to be able to participate in that with a whole heart and not be constantly thinking about their own body during this grieving experience with their family.
Mm-hmm.
And so some people do it because they have an event coming up, and that's kind of what it's built for. But you can
Mm-hmm.
also just bring in photos of your own. I can help you do selfies,
Mm-hmm.
because the goal is just to have photos of you to work with. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter to me whether they're existing photos or not.
Mm-hmm.
But what it includes is, in addition to, it has blanket forward access built in for your 6 months. So you're a member for 6 months and you can do any of these things anytime during that 6 months. So you get access to all these things and the ability to schedule with me for that 6 months. And if you don't do it before 5 months are up, I'm going to harass you about it to make sure that you get what you signed up for.
Uh-huh.
But because when you don't have to do something right away, they can kind of fall off the radar. But there are 2 one-on-one meetings with me. So you get to meet before and after whatever photos you're having taken with me. The first one, I hype you up. If you need, again, these are so customized, because there's no point in giving you things you don't need. But in general, we hype you up for your photos that are coming up. If you're nervous about posing, I will walk you through poses so you already know how. Like if you're afraid your photographer's not going to give you direction,
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you some strategies and some poses you can come in with. If body image is really where you need the most help, we're going to look at your body image history, your family and body image, and we're going to really do some of that hard work in advance so that you can come in to your session already having worked some of that stuff out.
Mm-hmm.
Then after, you're going to meet with me, or you can do both meetings with existing photos. But generally, after your photos, you're going to meet with me. We'll look at your photos together. We'll do some exposure therapy. We'll go back to the things we talked about before and say, okay, Now let's look at your grandmother's bingo wings.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And
Yes.
let's talk about
Wow.
those feelings. Let's look at
Mm,
those at your arms, and let's examine where it comes back to systems of power. Let's examine where
mm,
this falls for you.
mm,
Then the day of your session, if you're having them done, you get day of photos chat support with me. So you can book,
mm,
you can get on my calendar for that day, and we'll just text back and forth.
mm.
So you have a friend in your pocket the whole day. And then also, like I said, you get access to my library of resources. You get access to the blanket fort, and some other good stuff.
Amazing.
But it's really sort of making all these things available to everyone around the world
Mm,
who isn't necessarily able to just, I'm just going to go to Seattle. I'm going to fly to Seattle this week and have a session. Just really bringing that approach to
mm.
everybody.
It's such an amazing support. I mean, I don't know who couldn't benefit from that, like regardless of your history or your body image issues. I mean, just all of it just sounds so nurturing and nourishing and
Yeah, that's the
reparative.
goal.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's just, it has all, everything that I don't want to say my whole life, but
Mm,
certainly my whole journey since 2015, being in this terrible corporate job and going, nope, I'm done, can't do it
hmm
anymore.
hmm
Things have kept, these threads have kept coming together for me.
Yeah.
And it's been this really wonderful, in the sense of full of wonder, this
Mm,
wonderful process of, oh, these things connect.
mm,
Oh, these things connect.
yeah.
Oh, these things connect. And so scene has really been the latest iteration of these strands coming together and going, these things are related. These
Hmm.
things need to be put together in a way that they are accessible.
Yeah. Yeah. Lindley, I'm so grateful for who you are, what you do. It's just such a gift and resource for our whole community. So thank you.
Thank you.
If listeners want to find you and get connected with you, how can they do that?
Everything that I do is at bodyliberationphotos.com, or you can just Google my name, Lindley Ashline. There's only one of me. So for better or worse, you'll find me.
Yeah.
And if you want free writing from me every week, I do have a newsletter with over 5,000 subscribers that is called the Body Liberation Guide. And you can find that at bit.ly/body liberation guide, or you can find it on the website at the top of the page.
Perfect. And I'll put both of those things in the show notes so they can find you.
Yeah,
Mm.
thank you so much for having me, Cassie. It's always such a joy to be able to talk about these things.
Oh, it's been a joy to have you. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to Taking Up Space. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and found it to be a resource for you in your own embodiment, healing, and body liberation journey. I hope you can continue the conversation with me over on social media by sharing your thoughts, offering your ideas and suggestions for future episodes, or just connecting. You can find me on Instagram at Inner Atlas Therapy. If you liked this episode and want to support the show, please subscribe, rate, and review the show in your preferred podcast platform. And share this episode with a friend. This ensures that more people can find the pod and will amplify our message of body liberation for all. If you haven't checked it out yet, I have a free Taking Up Space workbook available. This workbook will have you engage in self-reflection and embodied practices as you navigate your own journey of taking up space. You can find this free resource on my website, inneratlastherapy.com. I'll also link in the show notes some additional resources I've developed in my online shop to help you deepen into your own embodiment, healing, and body liberation work. Thanks again for being here, and until next time, I hope you join me in the resistance and find some ways to take up space this week. I'll see you next time.